Did my hear not come through clear?
No, it was loud and clear, loud and clear,
Yep.
resounding. And for the record, Commissioner Ryman is absent.
And we're joined this evening at the staff table by Community Development Director David Loya and Senior Planner Dee Freitas. Let's see. Oral communications. The meeting is now open for communications from the public for items not on the agenda. Any items that require action may be set for an agenda or later date. If anybody would like to address the commission on items not on the agenda, now's your opportunity.
That's you. Is there anybody else calling? No. Go ahead.
All yours.
You can help her.
Yeah, to the...
Hi, everyone. My name is Peggy Martinez. I'm just going to navigate my little device here for a moment. I am here to talk a little bit about the proposed medical center, the Open Door Medical Center. I'm sorry, I'm navigating a little bit on my device. It's linear. Just give me one sec. So by way of introduction, I moved to Humboldt County in 1979 and have lived in Arcata and Eureka for most of that time since, although I've just returned from 11 years in Seattle. And the reason I'm mentioning that is so that you have an idea that I have, some knowledge of how things have been done and why decisions have been made and, this and that. So yeah, so sorry. Okay, so basically what I wanted to say is, firstly, I am absolutely, in favor of the Open Door Clinic's facility becoming state-of-the-art. That is a crucial thing, and that is certainly, a win-win for all concerned. My concern is about moving a sort of a location or a facility that is really centrally located downtown. They're served by several bus lines that are all converge at the Arcata Transit Center. The facility right now, or both facilities really, are near shopping, restaurants, banking, and other amenities. And I think moving those entities and consolidating into a place where there are virtually no amenities will negatively affect a significant segment of the user population. That includes patients, their families, and very likely staff as well. So, yeah, I think that's kind of the thing. So right now, I did meet with Laura Kaplacek yesterday, and so I sent a letter to Joe Mateer that I would like to have added to the public record, or, I'd like it to come to you, and I'm not really sure. I guess I can just ask him if he would make sure that you guys get it, because I'm a little bit more eloquently stated my concerns. So basically it has to do with the amenities and the walkability and how there is going to be only one bus line that really serves that facility, that will serve that facility, and that will be the Gold Route, and that bus route runs every hour, as we know. Another concern I have is that right now there is not a plan for any kind of on-site food facility. So once a person gets to that location, there's nothing really there for the patients. So it's basically, I feel like we are creating a situation, unless we come up with some solutions, and I do have a list of solutions, but unless we do come up with some solutions, we're going to create sort of like another little suburb office park type setting, where people have to drive to, And as far as I know, that is sort of counter to the city of Arcata's general, environmental outlook and that kind of thing. So what I would like to see is increased frequency of AMRTS service. I'd like to see additional Redwood Transit service, bus routes, or not bus route, but just a stop nearer to the facility. Right now, it's at HSU, which is a significant walking distance from the new facility. So I think there should be a way for people to purchase healthy and affordable food on site. And that's kind of it, I just think it's important to articulate that to you. You guys have, I feel like it's the most holistic place. Talking to the Transportation Safety Committee, the Environmental Committee, all these different entities ultimately sort of, end up to, with your sort of, you guys are kind of, as far as I understand, kind of the final sort of say as to whether something's going to happen or not. And pardon me for not knowing exactly how it works. But anyway, so like I said, I sent an email to Joe Mateer, and I would like for you guys to receive that, that info. And thank you very much for listening and for all the work you guys do. That's it.
Well, thank you very much for addressing us on that. Are there any commission comments or feedback on that at this point?
Yeah, actually, I'd recommend that you take your concern about food to the Open Door folks.
I have.
I know they are quite concerned about food and health issues.
And who is speaking right now?
John Barstow.
And if I may, obviously these aren't times to have substantive comments, but I just wanted to let the speaker know that the current plan is to have the Open Door project back before the Planning Commission on January 28th for review of the final impact report, the environmental impact report, and to hear the project again. And so that's an opportunity. Your letter will be included if you've submitted one to the Planning Commission on that. And then in terms of the process, the Planning Commission on this project, because the project involves a development agreement, will be referred to the City Council after the Planning Commission's review. And so you have an opportunity to speak also to the City Council on those topics.
Okay. And who was just speaking then?
My name is David Loy. I'm the Director of Community Development.
Thank you. Are there any other commission comments?
Yeah, this is Judith Mayer, a planning commissioner. One of the things that came up before us at our last hearing had to do with the locations of the bus stop. And there were a few people who pointed out that the planned location for that bus stop involves some street crossings that may be difficult for some people, and so comments about appropriate locations for bus facilities are actually really helpful, because that is one of the issues that may still be pretty flexible.
I'm going to caution commissioners about talking about substantive matters on the project, since the project wasn't noticed, and this is intended purely for oral communications. Conveying information about when the next meeting is appropriate, but having a discussion about items that are substantive to the matter really is not. So I appreciate if we consider that.
Yeah, David, that's a point of confusion then on my part. My notes from the city on protocol says specifically here, after all communications are complete, ask if any PC commissioners or members would like to respond.
Responses should be brief and directed at follow-up actions, as opposed to discussing or deliberating or having conversations that could be construed as deliberations about a matter that's before your body. And so comments like, we should take that up. I'd like to put that on the agenda. That's coming up at the next meeting. Those are appropriate. Discussing the merits of the comment and its implications on the project really are not appropriate because the item wasn't noticed and the applicant isn't in the room to hear that information and respond to it.
Okay, thank you. This is a rare opportunity for us to work this out. Anything else? In brief. All right, we will revisit this one on the 28th. So, moving on our agenda, we go on to the consent calendar. The only item on our consent calendar this evening is to approve the minutes from our last meeting of December 10th, 2019. If there are no changes or objections, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. And now we can move on to our first public hearing of the evening, our only public hearing of the evening. And the item there is, pardon me, to approve a use permit for the Straight Arrow Management Services Incorporation Cannabis Micro Business at 4801 West End Road. Can we have a staff report, please?
Yeah, thank you. So, as you just said, this is a use permit for a cannabis micro business, Straight Arrow Management Services. The applicant's agents are in the audience tonight and will be available for any questions that you may have. So this is the recommendation. We'll bring it back up at the end, but essentially staff recommends the Planning Commission approve the use permit for the development and operation of cannabis cultivation by adopting the action with findings and conditions of approval and a Class 1 CEQA exemption pursuant to existing facilities. So just wanted to run you through the attachments in your packet really quickly. The draft action with findings and conditions of approval can be found on page 11 of your packet. Site plans begin on page 21, and the submitted operations plan is on page 27. So here's just a little bit of locational background. Obviously, this project is in the Cannabis Innovation Zone. It's in Area 2. This is the site itself, and you'll notice in your packet, this is the parcel. It's a bit of an unusual configuration. It consists of 2 existing buildings, both of which will be used for this application, Building 1 and Building 2. And you'll notice in the southwest, there is a parcel that does not front West End Road. It's accessed through this parcel, just as an FYI. So we'll start with Building 2. As it's smaller, there's less going on here. It's about 1,900 square feet and will ultimately comprise of commercial nursery space and storage for the business. Building 1 has the majority of the uses for the micro business, including 4,480 square feet of cultivation, as well as space for non-volatile manufacturing, packaging and labeling, and warehousing and distribution space. So I wanted to run you pretty quickly through this request for increased cultivation area. This is what Building 1 currently looks like internally on the ground floor, and this is on page 23 of your packet, sheet A2. This is what it will ultimately look like if the project is approved. There will be 4 internal divisions that will separate a 40 by 112 foot freestanding structure, which will be used for cannabis cultivation, which totals 4,480 square feet, or 33.8% of the total floor area of the buildings on the site. So the typical limit laid out in the land use code is 25% of the floor area and limited to 4,000 square feet. So this is the section of the code that discusses that, and you'll notice under C here, it says limitations on cultivation area may be exceeded through the issuance of a use permit. So that's part of this application tonight. So these are the justifications that the applicant put forward for why this increase would not be inappropriate for the site. All operations will be indoors, odor and noise will be regulated, and general operations are anticipated to be relatively unchanged, not significantly impacted by this increase in cultivation area. So these things are discussed in more detail in your findings as part of the action. I have not gone into them here, but obviously any element of this can be discussed if the commission chooses to do so, and the applicant will be available for questions. And again, this is the recommendation included in your packet.
Thank you, Deela. Are there any commission questions of staff on that?
I do have one question. In the application included an operation manual, and this is something the applicant could respond to as well as you. And one of the things that was mentioned in several locations was that only non-volatile solvents would be used for the process. There was no information, however, about how much ethanol would be used, and I'm wondering what qualifies ethanol as non-volatile. So if the applicant could respond to that, that's important. They also mentioned that there would be no ethanol discharge to sewers at all. So I'm wondering what happens other than that the ethanol is either completely closed loop or that it does volatilize. And also wondering how any volatilized ethanol would be trapped or somehow not released through the filter system, because my understanding is that volatile ethanol will go right through those filter systems and possibly carry anything else caught in the filter system up to the air with it, and the air quality section in there didn't even mention that. So I'd love some explanation.
I think that's a great question, and I think the applicant should handle that one. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a great answer. So
We'll wait on that just for a moment. Anything else? Any other commission questions before we move on? Okay, seeing none, we will open it now to the applicant and/or their agent for the first opportunity at the mic.
Good evening, Commission. My name is Praj White, and I'm agent for this project. I want to discuss just directly the question about the non-volatile and the volumes of solvent. So it is kind of an interesting circumstance that ethanol is considered non-volatile. However, the determination of that was decided at the state level regarding cannabis licensing. So when we're talking about manufacturing, we're talking about non-volatile being a type 6 license, which the state of California considers non-volatile. Now, that isn't an argument from the state that says ethanol isn't potentially flammable. And so we got to separate those two issues. And I believe that the city of Arcata's regulations follow the state guidelines as far as volatile and non-volatile. So really, it's just a semantics of terms, how this says non-volatile, but you have a flammable substance. So when we get into volumes of flammable substance throughout the state, really this is handled through the California Building Code. And the building code, so when the building permit comes on, and I don't know the tiers, I'm going to misquote a couple volumes, but just to give you the sense, the tiers are that basically somewhere under 15 gallons of ethanol is basically considered not a hazardous volume of ethanol to be in one place. When you get into the building code and you exceed that, and there's some arguments if that's 5 gallons or 1 gallon or 15, but really the threshold is somewhere less than 15 gallons is generally considered not a hazard or a storage of hazardous material in the building code. Once we exceed that threshold of the 15 gallons or wherever the local building official determines it to be, we move into what's called a control area. So the volume of solvent and the use of that solvent has to occur within a control area within the building, which is generally a 1 hour fire rated construction unit with all the ventilation and sensors in it to make sure that should there be a problem where it heats up or the evacuation, mechanical evacuation of the room is defaulted, there's sensors in there that allow it to handle that correctly. Generally, the industry in extraction of cannabis, we're using ethanol. From what I understand, it generally goes more and more towards a cold substance. So if you heat ethanol up, well, you have a more hazardous situation, but it doesn't do the job of extracting as well. And so by keeping it cool, I just want to point out, so when we're in these rooms in a control area exceeding the 15 gallons, there are all these measures within the room to make sure that it's safe. And generally, I see what's happening is I want to use an example of a current product, they call it a cup. And it's really like a little mini washing machine. And you put in your cannabis and the ethanol, and it agitates it kind of like a drop-in or a top-load washing machine, and agitates that along. And then after the amount of agitation, it will spin, and it will basically be able to reclaim and recycle all of that residual ethanol that's left in the fiber. And it's my understanding that the Cup 15s and other tools allow you to get in excess of 99.5% recovery. And so the amount of ethanol that is left in the product is so small that it is less than any of the thresholds. And it's my understanding at that point it can be taken to a facility like West Green. And so at that point you're basically recovering all of it and following procedures for proper discharge or disposal is the right word. Does that answer your question?
So how much ethanol would be involved in your process as you've anticipated?
Again, it will be run through the building official, but it's my understanding that once you're in a control room, the maximum allowable volume in that room is 120 gallons. And that if the room is further controlled through fire sprinklers, I believe that volume is allowed to be doubled. So the operation per building code restrictions could bring us up to as much as 240 gallons within a control area.
And are all four of those areas, or all three of those process areas considered to be control areas?
No, I believe that we only have one manufacturing area in the building. So there would only be one control area. It's a good question. In the building code, it actually allows for 4 of these rooms on the first floor and 3 of these rooms on the second floor, and you can stack them up. However, in this proposal and in this applicant's wishes, they're only asking for one control area and one room. So the solvents will ultimately be limited to what's allowed in that room.
Okay, and so would that be number 11, 12, or 13 on your schematic here? That each say processing?
So room 14 is the manufacturing room. And then the other 4 rooms that you're pointing out in the spread of the main floor area, those are all just cultivation areas.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to relay to us while you're up there?
You know, I believe that the applicants come forward with a pretty standard project. You guys have seen a lot of projects through the MMIZ, and I feel like this is a very standard project. I want to emphasize the emphasis on the, why did I just forget, the micro business license, where you have the combination of cultivation, manufacturing, and distribution, is really a model that appears to be a very sustainable business model in the cannabis world, and that's what's pointed towards this project. So with that, that's all I have. We're here for questions if you have more.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak on this item?
I really just want to come up here and say that your process has been really well wrote out. It was extremely easy for us to answer your questions. I know that's it's somewhat related to this project, but I just want to thank all of you that have spent the time for this cannabis innovation zoning to happen. It has made, we've done a lot of projects in the Humboldt County region, and this has been a really great experience for our staff members as well. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Great. Thank you to the staff as well, of course. Anybody else on this item before we close the public hearing? Move on to commission deliberations. Nope. Okay, we will close the public input portion of the hearing and move on to commission deliberations and/or a motion.
I think asking for the extra few percent points for the grow area seems pretty reasonable in this case, simply because it is an existing building and it would not involve any external modifications at all to do that. It does sound like these are pretty standard processes. I'm reassured that the applicants have mentioned their pending or to be requested permits from the Air Quality Board and the Water Quality Board, because ethanol is not quite as innocuous as one would believe in large quantities or large high concentrations. And so having the fire department, the Air Quality Board, and the Water Quality Control Board in that process, in addition to the city building code folks, basically says these folks know what they're doing, and we're probably good to go.
Thank you, Judith. Anybody else?
There was a note in the conditions of approval that a landscape plan be required, and this project is adjacent to the freeway, 299. It'd be nice if there could be some screening. Looking at the overhead picture here, it looks like that you might have paving all the way up to the Caltrans right away, and so you might. But if it's possible, it'd be really nice to have some screening along that part of the property to screen it from the highway.
Thank you, John. Anybody else?
I didn't get a chance to visit the site, and I guess my map expertise has a little bit to be wanted. What are the two buildings on both sides, on either side?
If I can orient you real quick, Commissioner White, this is the mill yard here.
Okay.
And this is the gigantic green building before you get to Alder Grove Road, right up here.
Okay.
That's on West End Road. This is West End Road facing, going east. North in this picture is that way.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah, kind of that way.
Yeah, it's facing north.
Follow up on that, David. Is North Coast Fabricators is down that same lane, correct?
Correct.
And which buildings are still them and not this cannabis operation?
Go ahead. Oh, okay. So I believe, is this North Coast Fabricators here. So this is outside. This is West End Road, North Coast Fabricators, fronts, West End. You basically would... Oh, it's this one?
If the applicant would like to comment, yeah, just do it at the mic so that the TV audience can hear.
So the proposed parcel is North Coast Fabricator, and this is a new business plan for him that he wants to pursue. So it is the two buildings that we have that we are filing for the applicant.
Oh, good clarification. Excellent.
So what we've always known as North Coast Fabricators is not going to be any longer when this goes in.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
But I think the point that was made earlier is that this parcel wholly encloses this parcel as well. And so they're still going to have access through this parcel.
Okay, does that answer your question about orientation?
Thank you.
All right, anything else and/or a motion?
Make a motion to approve the use permit for the Straight Arrow Management Services, file number 190-017.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of this, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. Congratulations. We'll look forward to seeing your project come to fruition. So, we will move on in our agenda to business items, none listed. Correspondence and communications. Anything from staff on that?
I have just a couple of items. It's the beginning of the year, so we have a lot of events coming up. The first is the regularly scheduled Planning Commission annual report to the City Council, which will happen this Thursday. City Council moved their meeting date to Thursday instead of Wednesday, and I believe the chair is planning to come to that. Thank you. We also have coming up in March the annual City Council study session with the chairs. That date is tentatively programmed for March 26th, but we'll be reaching out to you. The city manager's office will be reaching out to you to schedule for that. It is an open meeting, but it's not a meeting of all the bodies. You're welcome to come, but the chairs are the ones that are participating in that primarily. As such, we'll be programming for either your second meeting in February or first meeting in March an agenda item under business items to discuss items that you'd like the chair to bring up at that annual study session. The other item that I have is for the Martin Luther King Jr. January 20th, the day in honor of Martin Luther King Jr., the City Hall will be closed. So I just wanted to let the public know that. Next, the Planning Commission has an open vacancy, and so I want to encourage folks to apply for that vacancy and join the team. Lastly, I wanted to let you all know that the King Tides are upon us. Last weekend was our first King Tides of the year, and we had staff out doing the sea level observations for folks. We had several people, maybe up of 70 I've heard, out taking pictures and uploading them to our story map website, and also marking the location of the high tide. This last weekend on Saturday, it was an 8.4 high tide. So that was a good event. The Arcata Marsh Interpretive Center also had a parody event, and Elliot DeBille put on a presentation that was very well attended. So we're keeping the interest in king tides, what's going on around us, climate change, and sea level rise. We're going to continue those in February. February 8th and 9th is the next set of king tides, and those tides are anticipated to be around 8.4 feet. On the 9th, the high tide will be at 12:06, and we'll also be having a presentation, joint presentation between some professors from HSU and the Oceanography Department and city presenters, and I believe that starts at 9:45 at the Arcata Marsh Interpretive Center.
9th of February?
Excuse me?
9th of February?
The 9th of February.
And 12:06 in the afternoon.
12:06 in the afternoon is the high tide, 9:45 is the presentation, really trying to get people interested and active in our king tide events to talk about sea level rise and other climatic variabilities that we'll have to deal with in the future.
Thank you, David. I was able to attend Alderon Laird's sea level rise presentation, and it's fabulous. I know that we've heard some or most of it here, I think, but it's something that we just all need to keep revisiting. It's stunning to see the projections and to think about the stuff that we're discussing here about protecting different parts of the city and movement of a wastewater treatment plant and things that are certainly not too far off on the horizon if you follow the science. It's incredible to see the graphics and to think it through. So I would encourage all to see that once or twice. It takes a lot. The other thing is that there was a question in the audience about where we can find it online. I don't have that reference right now. He didn't mention the City of Arcata's website as one option to find his up-to-date, most recent stuff, and it sure feels like it should be available there. So that's just a suggestion. I have one other thing to bring up on this to Fridas about the information you gave us last meeting about AB 68 and AB 881. It was so brief and kind of compacted, and I just really look forward to unraveling that and seeing how it's going to affect this community in terms of accessory dwelling units and the stuff that we keep talking about.
So we did discuss that prior to this meeting. Staff yesterday and today discussed questions that we are still working out, and we forwarded them to HCD staff, Housing and Community Development staff, and we're working with them on unraveling some of those. There is a lot to unpack. And the other good news is just today they sent out a 23-page memorandum about some of the changes HCD did. So we should be able to have that analyzed and ready for you by our next meeting. And we can list it as a regular agenda item, I believe, so we can really dig into it. And the other thing that, I don't know if it's a business item, but this, you will notice this memorandum at your seat. So these are changes to the land use code that happened in the last year. The city clerk provided a copy for each of the commissioners.
However, these don't include these new bills that we were just discussing.
No, they do not. They're just changes to our city code.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what the memo is the compilation of land use code amendments and municipal code amendments that were made in the last year. Once a year we print them out, and then you can update your physical copy. They're updated online as soon as the ordinances become effective, and then we deliver them to you in January for you to update your physical code.
First, I'd really like to thank you for printing this out on paper and getting it to us. I know a lot of people have given up on paper, but I actually do use the paper version, so I super, super appreciate it.
That's all Bridget, our clerk, will pass it along, though. She's wonderful.
I also, on the sea level rise note, I think that the county is having a public meeting tomorrow evening at the Warfinger Building, 5:30 to 7, about the county's climate action plan. And it looks like it will be really interesting and something that the public and planning commissioners might want to attend. There's also a conference for planning commissioners that the American Planning Association, California, and other organizations are sponsoring at Sonoma State on February 1st. And some commissioners might be interested in going. I think it's an $80 fee, plus getting yourself down there. But it's a chance to hear what's going on in planning commissions around the state in a place that is in Arcata. So,
is that a one-day workshop?
Yeah, it is a one-day conference. I wrote to David Loya about possibly getting assistance with the $80 fee for commissioners who wanted to go. it sounds like maybe that's a possibility for next year. Is that correct?
Might I pitch that, as we're not very capable of, because of Brown Act stuff, communicating with each other, that links to such events come through the city? Is that a possibility?
Certainly. I think that we're starting to get a little long-winded for our communications and correspondence, but maybe we could take this up at our special meeting, which is coming up next.
Okay, I guess unless there's anybody else that didn't get to join in on the correspondence and communications, we can go ahead and adjourn this meeting and close it officially.